Thanks for tuning in to Becoming Something, where we promise to keep the conversation honest and real for young adults in their 20s and 30s. Every moment we live is training for a future moment, and that's why we do this podcast, because we want you to be prepared for everything that life is going to throw at you. Our hope with this podcast is that it would help you become all that God desires you to be. So with that in mind, let's jump right in to this week's episode of Becoming Something.
What's up, podcast world? It's your boy JP in the podcast studio. You been biting your fingernails, man?
No, I just cut them this morning.
Man,
They were getting a little long.
You cut them aggressively.
They seem really
Who
short.
likes to waste time cutting your fingernails?
That is Nate No Fingernail Hilgenkamp. That's hard to say.
It's hard.
And
Mine are bad too.
Kathy with Child Davidson.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's
Wow.
go.
Pregnant.
Come on. You're going out of town this weekend?
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm going away by myself. Have you guys ever gone on like an overnight trip by yourself? Like 48 hours with just me.
Yeah,
and
the only time is like if I'm officiating a wedding and I'm just there by myself and it stinks.
48 hours with just Kathy.
God. And the Lord. So I'm kind of scared too, honestly.
That sounds...
What am I going to discover about myself?
Like, is this a choice?
Yes, I
from
asked
you?
for it for my birthday.
Or did you get in trouble?
No. Yeah, Matt's putting me in
Like
timeout.
solitary confinement is the most harsh,
No.
the harshest legal punishment one can endure.
I'm going to have a cute little cabin and a fire pit. I'm going
Yeah.
to start my own fire.
that-
I'm going
How
to
How
go
you
on
gonna
walks.
start your own fire?
I'm going to get a lot
Rub
of lighter
sticks together,
fluid and just
lot of
pour it on the
lighter
ground.
fluid.
So what you do for fun is you go off and be by yourself.
Yeah.
For what I do for fun is typically I like hang out with Louis Giglio and Christian Stanfill and Brett
Shout
Yonker
out.
and Jeff Johnson and we just kind of cut up.
Oh, and Brad Jones is real upset with you.
And
right
Brad Jones. Actually, Brad Jones was on this podcast.
So you want us to talk about your weekend and how you just met all those guys?
Oh, I wasn't meaning to do that.
Oh, you weren't trying to steal the thunder. Yeah.
But yeah, that
Now-
was just a
now that we're on the
passion.
topic.
Yeah, now that
You made some new
brought
best
it up, what we do for fun, it was amazing.
Oh my God.
Guys, this episode of Becoming Something sponsored by Nerds Candy Corn. Yeah,
I'm so glad you brought those because I wanted to try it and they're really good.
they are pretty amazing.
So on the flight to Atlanta, I was reading a book that was not helpful. It was called Outdated on dating, and I was just like, man,
Ouch.
You do know you're married?
has not. Well, a lot of my job is dealing with college students, and young adults,
He's married, but he has to stay relevant. So
Honestly.
and I was just like, I feel like there's got to be a better resource than this.
A better dating book?
Yes.
yeah, the Bible,
But the Bible doesn't have that much to say on dating.
1 Corinthians 7.
So it's like, surely there's
Ephesians
someone.
5, 1 Peter 3.
There's someone that we could actually talk
Who's like
to.
more of the expert?
Yes, who
than
could kind of give us.
JP?
I'm right here.
Who's sitting right next
Oh,
to you?
you wrote that thing?
This is what you did to Brett Yonker. He was like, Louis had to skip lunch, and they sent Brett Yonker, and Nate was like, "Who is Brett Yonker?"
And then you told Brett that?
Yeah, 100% I did.
Gosh.
That's what has
Nate,
to
why
happen.
are you the way that you are? You're not getting invited back.
Guys, like, I don't know who your hero is. Someone
You
on The
do
Bachelorette
know.
or something.
No,
It's like, that's who Louis is to me. Like,
Don't
imagine
watch
if,
that show.
imagine if, I don't know, Regis and Kelly, whatever, she canceled on you.
Regis and Kelly?
Do you know me at all?
They're in life group together, man.
You don't know one thing about me.
All right, so we need a dating expert because
'Cause you're not enough.
Current company is
Do
not
you-
enough.
do you know
do you
of
know a
any-
dating expert?
I do not, so that's why I'm asking you guys.
Oh.
Do you know of anyone we could talk to?
Well, we do have this book by Tavares and Safa Gray, Godly Dating 101.
Whoa.
Godly Dating 101. Should we bring Tavares on?
I think
Yeah.
we should. That'd
He
be
sounds
amazing.
like the expert.
Tavares, are you available?
Something like that.
What's up?
I think we might have scared him away
He's like,
after
"No, I'm
that,
taken."
honestly.
You guys are absolutely terrible. I loved the book Outdated, actually.
Yeah.
And thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I loved it so much. I felt the need to correct it. I had to,
Not at all.
I had
Not
to
at
put
all.
some other truth out there.
That's
Not-
amazing.
So
not
the
at
subtitle is
all.
Discover the Truth About Relationships in a World That Constantly Lies. Discover the truth about
That's
relationships
good.
in a world that constantly lies. You guys run the handle Godly Dating 101. which has millions. I don't know, right? Something crazy, some amount of followers. That's a lot. Right, Tavares?
He's trying not to brag.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it was not a humble brag.
Right,
I was literally just
checking.
listening. You know that.
I thought you were counting them in your head. You're like, well, let's see.
It's that. You know, like when you invite a preacher and they're awkwardly standing there listening to their bio. Like I was just like, oh, okay. I mean, but
we don't.
I guess if you add
awkward.
everything up,
we don't do anything awkward on this show, and we keep it pretty straight. So,
where did this come from? Why did you start this Instagram? Write this book? Why are you passionate about this topic? You could be teaching about billions of things.
Yeah. So it's weird because I never wanted to talk about dating. Okay. Like my brother and I, we ran an account. We called it Anointed Misfits because we would always stir the pot on Twitter. But people really couldn't get mad because we'd show a lot of Bible verses to support what we believe. You know, my brother was in college and, you know, so he was busy. And then I would be the one posting more. And then I realized anytime I spoke about dating, lust, sex, anything along those lines, there would be dozens, if not hundreds of questions. So I'm just like, well, no one speaks about this at church, you know, and I'm going to talk about it.
Tavares,
You know,
it's not that no one does, because some people do.
No. Listen, I think nowadays, I think it's an amazing job. A lot of churches are trying to talk about relationships, but I never heard anything growing up other than Christians shouldn't be having sex outside of marriage. And it was the same thing at Southwest Church. And it's just like, okay, well, how do we avoid that? Because 9 times out of 10, someone is going to experience it and say, this is amazing. I'm doing it again. You know, so that's why I was just like, you know, I started that and I realized, well, this is something where a lot of people have questions and issues about. So I started posting that, told my brother, you know, I feel like God wants me to do it. And he just like, go for it. You know, I'm not using the page. And then I swapped it. And then it took off like wildfire. It's crazy because the book came out 10 years from when I first launched the page.
Oh, wow. And
I didn't realize it until I looked at Twitter a couple weeks ago. And I was just like, oh, September 2012 and now September 2022 is when the book, you know, was released. But it was just something that I never really felt qualified for it or wanted to talk about it because I started the page single, started the page struggling with lust, started the page, you know, and I feel as though most people, when they hear someone talking about this topic, they're thinking about some teenage woman. They're not thinking it's a guy, you know, and where I grew up, I grew up in the hood, you know, so you got made fun of because you weren't trying to sleep with everyone. So I never felt like
Nate did too, grew up in the hood. So he's right there with you, man.
You know, but I've been at church since I was about 3 or 4. My parents, you know, raised us in the church. But every person, if not every, you know, but majority of people I saw leave the church was because of bad relationships. So I just felt called to continue trying to help people navigate finding the right relationships, avoiding the wrong ones, and you know, we're here now. And I honestly feel as though it's a whole lot of things you can talk about. I genuinely don't only like talking about dating. You know, if you ever listen to our podcast, I'm trying to talk about everything else. Godly living is what I'm trying to preach to people. But it's the fact that it's so many people that want to live for God, but then they get into the wrong relationship and then everything else goes sideways. God gets secondary, you know, so that's just, you know, our desire, trying to tell people, you know, God does mention how we should navigate relationships, you know, just trying to bring out biblical principles, you know, so people can approach dating in the right way.
Where do you think the church misses it? And what is the right message? Like, what should the church be saying about dating?
I think our issue is we don't talk about dating enough. We just tell people, you know, avoid sin. And the issue is we don't really, I honestly don't believe we do a good job of teaching people biblical principles, because truth be told, we heard you shouldn't be having sex. And a lot of us, we got to the mindset that sex is dirty, sex is not God's will. And then it's very awkward on your wedding day because they never talked about the beauty of sex. They just said, don't do it. Yeah. And then it's like you flip the switch. You go from, you know, don't even shake her hand. Don't even give her a side hug. And now I'm supposed to just be a sexual being. Yeah. You know, so I think the problem is we never really taught people, well, how do I navigate what I'm feeling? How do I express, you know, things in a godly way? So now the enemy's always giving us all these temptations, and young people don't feel comfortable coming to us, you know, as leaders, as pastors, because truth be told, a lot of us one of our biggest issues, we're never vulnerable about the issues that we have. You know, so anytime I do a podcast, teaching at church or preaching or something, I'm always telling people where I struggle or where God is working on me, because I felt like growing up, man, well, I'm the only guy in this church with a lust problem, because none of you guys are going to tell me how do I navigate this, you know. So I honestly believe that a church, in the past, I don't see it as much now, but in the past, I felt like we viewed leaders on a pedestal, you know, and I genuinely believe sad to stir the pot with saying this, but there's a lot of spiritual idolatry. Whereas if JP says it, then it's doctrine. Mm-hmm. Someone else says it, then it's just like, not really. But then we elevate these leaders so much when, truth be told, if I ever spoke to JP one-on-one, he'd tell me, bro, I had that same issue. You know what I mean? And, so I just felt like that was one of our biggest issues, whereas we never told people where we're falling short and where God is working on us. We just love the part of our testimony that says, well, look where God brought me from. Mm-hmm. Well, I think we can approach dating and relationships, all that in a healthy way. If we say, well, I'm married currently, and I have to crucify my flesh because when I'm out on the streets, I'm tempted. And I feel as though a lot of young people can say, I understand that. I could gravitate towards that. At least I know that God can still work on me. At least I know there's grace with where I'm struggling. So I think that's the biggest issue. Whereas if we want to see people date in a healthy way, we can't make them feel as though God only loves them if they're perfect, or that they have to go outside of the church to find information. Because sadly, our world is being driven by TikTok and Instagram memes. And while I love seeing, an audience listening to when I'm trying to put out biblical advice, it's a lot of toxic advice being pushed out there, especially to our young people. And they think it's normal because the person they're hearing has a blue check, or the person they're hearing calls themselves Christian. But truth be told, they're not using the Bible to support any of their points of views. So that's why I just thought we have to be careful with allowing our young people to get resources outside of the church, because it can become dangerous very fast.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest challenge Christians are faced with in dating today?
I think the pressure is a lot of pressure with them to have sex. It feels like everyone is doing it, and truth be told, everyone is not doing it. There's a lot of people that are saying
less and less, actually.
Yeah.
Exactly. And sadly, a lot of people who do have sex prior to marriage don't always end up getting married. A lot of people who end up living together is a lower chance of them getting married. So I think there's a lot of pressure with people feeling as though if I don't do this, then I'm not really a man. If I don't do this, he'll never really love me. And that was the insecurity that I had, because I got bullied growing up, because it's just like, dude, women are throwing themselves at you. Why aren't you sleeping with them? And in my head, I'm just like, I thought we were supposed to wait until marriage, and it was just like, dude, no one is doing that, and sadly, some people had that mindset even in church. So it was just like, well, does this make me a man or not? And I spoke to someone recently, a couple weeks or months ago, and I was telling them, honestly, I felt like that problem was still in the back of my head when I got married, because I tell people all the time, marriage doesn't cure a lust problem, but I never realized women would still flirt with you when you got married, so it's just like, well, this is awkward. But I was never quick to shut it down, because in my mind, I was thinking, oh, okay, well, I'm still a man. I still got it. When truth be told, exactly, because you have that in the back of your mind telling yourself that, I'm a man because I could get anybody I want, and it's not that something went anywhere, but it's the fact that I didn't realize that the enemy was trying to sow a seed into my marriage, whereas it would have caused an issue. So I try to tell people to not feel as though your worth is found in a relationship or found in sex. And unfortunately, that's where the culture is trying to drive us to. You have purpose or you have value if you're dating. You're loved if you're having sex, or that's where all the fun is. But truth be told, sex clouds your judgment. So I try to tell people that we have to be careful not giving away parts of us because, we love someone or we're really infatuated. Because truth be told, those emotions, when they phase out, when that moment passes, now you're really faced with who you're really dating. And now you're really married to this person, and you realize we had nothing in common other than sex. So it's so important for us to realize that we can't place our identity in how many people we can get interested in us, how many people are staring at us, and all those things. And I know it's very difficult because we're in a sex crazed culture, crazed culture, and people will cut off pornography, but we don't cut off the TV shows that still sow the seeds, or the music, or the friends. And it's like, it's so difficult that you don't even realize that these thoughts are being planted into your heart until you really allow God to work on it. So that's one thing that I noticed in the church, because that's something I had to work on for myself.
Let me go back to something you said. I don't want to move too far past it, because do I still have it is one of the most dangerous questions in the world. So I want to throw that out there to the audience and just say, like, I think the enemy really uses that, especially post-marriage. And so, but it starts, the consequences, I think, grow, but the idea starts before marriage. And really, especially for guys, because I'm experientially, I'm speaking on that, is just hey, do I still have it? Can I still get the attention? And girls do this too, like in the way they dress and whatnot. So
yeah, I remember maybe like a few months into marriage, I realized like I had a really flirty personality back in the day, like really lively, outgoing. And when I was single, I probably enjoyed that too much and always had crushes on guys and always was, I think unintentionally, but flirting with pretty much any guy that breathed. And when I got married, it's not like that just stopped.
Yeah.
It took me a few months where I was like, am I flirting with this person?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be doing that. I know I shouldn't. But if you're sowing those seeds, if you're cultivating that, if you're feeding that while you're dating, it's not just going to magically disappear.
100%.
That's right.
I completely agree with you. The book is Godly Dating 101. Discover the truth about relationships in a world that constantly lies. Anything else as you think through the landscape, the challenges that people face today in dating? I know we said sex, right? Just the sex-craved culture, the current of sexualization of everything. Hey, you need to be doing it. Try before you buy. All of that. So I agree with you. Can you think of other challenges that hit the landscape today?
I think our culture really, our generation really lacks accountability. And I think it's partly because of how controlling older generations were, right? So we're looking at it like it doesn't take all that. But truth be told, there's a lot of older people that can see the direction you're headed and they're trying to stop you. But our generation, we don't really like listening to our pastors until we're in trouble. We don't tell them who we're dating until we're engaged. So sometimes there's not a lot of godly accountability. And I'm not one of those people that says you need to be on double dates and this person has to be approved by the entire general board. And listen, I'm not one of those people. My wife and I, she didn't even post me. Only a few people knew we were talking. Parents were involved, pastors were involved. No one else needs to be involved, but I feel as though a lot of things we lack accountability, and it allows us to live a lot of secrecy. And unfortunately, secrecy is not always beneficial, because I believe in a private life, but it's very easy for you to get caught up in your emotions. Once you like someone, once your emotions get involved, a spark can be started out of nowhere. So I think a lack of accountability is an issue that we need to work on, and finding godly community, because when you don't have that godly community, those people that are holding you in check, those people that are encouraging you, those people that are correcting you, because a lot of times we have those yes men, yes women in our corner, like, hey, good job, bro. Good job, sis. And it's just like, do you also have that person that could say, hey, the way you just spoke to her, that was that was out of pocket. Like that wasn't even acceptable. And I know that's how you guys communicate. And I get that she may not look offended, but that's not how you should be treating your wife,
Great.
And I need those type of people in my life, and I remember I spoke to someone, I won't say who the person was, obviously, but I spoke to someone because they're married, and I know we're talking about dating, but it was still the way he spoke to his wife. And I had to pull him aside, like, you're not going to do that again.
How'd you respond to that?
I was like, man, you're right. You're right. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, like you're not doing that, because it was just that bad that I wasn't even trying to be pretty about it. I was just saying, you're not doing that again. You're not gonna talk to her like that. He got defensive, like he was ready to fight, and I didn't back down. We're about the same size. He probably would have won. Who knows? But I was just like, you're not gonna do that again. That was out of line or whatever. And he got mad or whatever. It de-escalated. I don't know how things are behind closed doors, but I wanted him to know, like, listen, we're called to love our wives as Christ loved the church. And people rush marriage, and I feel like you have no idea how intense it really is. Yeah. I think the hardest thing on the planet is to love a woman the way God loves us. Yeah, like, come on,
Tovares, what do you think that means? Love your wife as Christ loved the church. What do you think that means?
I try to just look at what Jesus was doing, the level of sacrifice, because it's like, if I don't step into the situation, it won't be resolved. So Jesus comes in and he's like, well, these people aren't going to follow the law. They're not going to make it in. They need an actual sacrifice that's able to take all this punishment for them. Because none of us are going to be perfect. He was the only one that could be spotless. So he stepped in and took the consequences of our sin. And when I look at how that looks for someone who's in a relationship, you cannot date a guy who's selfish and thinks he's going to love you the way Christ loves the church. Like that shows a selfless personality, someone who's willing to take the consequences even of your own mistake, you know. And that shows me that men, we have a calling to lead. We have a calling to make sure we're protecting. And a lot of times people love pushing the narrative that men must provide, and I agree. But a lot of men, we only provide financially. We don't provide emotional stability. We don't provide spiritual stability, and those are a lot of things families need. And I learned a principle growing up, and I never really realized how much of an issue it was, because that's not how my dad was. But people, they often said that ministers, we do a great job of trying to evangelize the world. And we don't evangelize our own home. We don't disciple our own home. We don't take care of our own children. So if I'm viewing it as though Christ loved the church, he did everything for his bride. So we should be making sure we're able to take care of our family. So a woman who's looking to date a guy, does he show the signs of a man who's able to disciple a home? Because I'm all for a woman that is spiritually mature. I'm not saying I need to know more Bible than my wife. I have to pray more hours than my wife. But am I showing signs that I can lead? When my wife is discouraged, can I uplift her? Or when I am, can she do that to me?
What do you think it means to lead in dating? And Tyler, do we have a clock? Go ahead.
So yeah, when it comes to dating, I think there's a few ways you can show it. So like an example, if you guys are struggling, temptation is there. It shows that the guy's leading in purity. If he's the one saying, I'm going to set boundaries, or he's the one saying, we're not going to allow it to get to this place. That means he's showing you that he's able to guard his heart, guard yours as well. And that's key, because if you're able to guard yourself in dating, that shows that you'll be willing to do the same in marriage. So leading as well. I think finances are definitely important, because love doesn't pay the bills. So if you see this guy is a responsible steward of his finances, giving to the church, securing things, ensuring he's paying off debt or things along that line, that's showing that this is a leader. Whereas when we get married, I'm not going to have to worry about being homeless. One of my wife's things, but I don't know why people view all military this way, but one of my wife's things was she's not marrying a military guy. And I'm just like, man, we got money, why you said it like I was gonna, you're gonna come here and be broke. And she was just like, I'm not gonna be homeless. And I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of sad scenarios where they get out and they don't have anything. So that was also one of her fears. So if you can show signs of responsibility, maturity, things along that line, I think that puts a woman's mind at ease, knowing she can trust that God is using him, or
I'd go slow on to the audience. I'd go slow on I'm not going to marry and say anything that's not other than something biblical, because I see it all the time. Like there was a young woman who said she was actually in Miss Texas, and she had to write 5 things she was looking for in a guy, and she said, I won't marry anyone with tattoos. And she ended up married this dude with a shirt, like not a sleeve. His entire upper body was tatted up. And so, I think that, dudes are quick to jump to the, hey, my wife has to submit to me. And we blow past that call to sacrifice. And sacrifice in my marriage really looks like putting her preference before my own at every turn, anytime I can, other than sin. And so, like, it really, if from the world, it would look like I am completely submissive to her. I mean, that's what it would look like from the world, but really, I'm sacrificing for her, and I say it would look like that. It would look like that if I was doing it correctly, which doesn't always happen. Right. But I'm sacrificing everything for her, and she's following me as I go. And in dating, dudes ask all the time, like, or so do women. What does leading look like in dating? And I would just say intentionality and leading in purity. What if people are in college and they're dating and they desire marriage? So it's like their sophomore year of college, they found someone that would make a God-fearing or a godly spouse. What would your advice be to them?
I think that's around a healthy time to especially start looking towards the idea of marriage, because in my opinion, when we're dating, the goal should be marriage in the end. But I'd say in those scenarios, make sure that you're thinking long term, because I think a lot of times when we're late teenage years, early 20s, a lot of times we're thinking fun. We're thinking who fits me, who looks nice, but we're not necessarily viewing a companion or a helpmeet. We're necessarily viewing marriage as the end game. So I would say you have to know who you are in Christ first. Because a lot of times when you're around that age group, a lot of people, they struggle with identity issues. They struggle with, well, who am I? What's my career going to be? What's my job going to be? And they're trying to discover themselves. And unfortunately, when you don't know who you are, especially when you don't know who you are in Christ, you'll place your identity in that relationship.
Yep.
So a lot of people, they'll place their identity in this guy they're dating or this woman they're dating.
Yep.
And if the relationship fails, now your life is a failure.
Yeah.
Now you feel as though you'll never recover. And it's not that, you're a bad person or they're a bad person, but you've just invested so much that you didn't realize you made an idol out of this relationship.
Yeah.
So it's important to discover who you are, because I believe that when you know who you are, you know when someone is fitting your calling or not.
Yeah.
You know if someone is helping your purpose or not. Because before I decided Self is the woman I want to marry, I had to also see plenty of women who I honestly believe were spiritual. I honestly believe were attractive. That does not mean they all were who God designed for me.
Yeah, but what if you were?
Like,
what if they are dating like somebody like, so it's a godly relationship? I mean, like, what if these are two mature believers? They dated well, and they're like, okay, we're sophomores in high school, but like
high school.
I'm sorry, sophomores in college. Thank you,
Yeah.
sophomores in college, and like we found the person. Like, what would your advice to them? Like, they're dating well, they're doing all the thing. They read Godly Dating 101. They want to do it, but it's like, man, we're sophomores in high school. I mean, in college. I keep saying that. Sophomores in college.
Yeah. So in my opinion, you're doing the right thing. So I would, honestly just encourage them to stay along that path and to consider towards marriage. I'm not a fan of people getting married in college, but I've seen it happen and I've seen it work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I understand people in those shoes, they're probably burning or considering, like, God, when is that next step going to be? So I would encourage them to.
Why are you not a fan of people getting married in college?
Unfortunately, there are some people that they jump into it just because I'm out of mom's home.
Yeah.
Just because I'm not under dad's guidance that, I can do whatever I want. And, they're not necessarily viewing it as though from a point of maturity.
Yeah.
So I honestly believe there are 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are 18-year-olds that are more mature than a 30-year-old. So that's not the case at all.
That's right.
But my thing is, if you see yourself at a point whereas you guys are doing everything healthy, you guys are involved in ministry, you guys are respecting boundaries, you're operating where God has called you to be. So my encouragement is simply to continue along that path because you want a kingdom marriage, so you guys just keep edifying one another, building one another up, and basically be a guide to other couples who are trying to be in the shoes that you're in. So I don't think it's anything. I feel like a lot of those people, and they're in that shoe just wondering, well, is marriage next? And if you guys are in a place where you can stabilize that, because financially it can be a little bit of an issue, then go ahead.
This is what's hard about giving people relationship advice. It's so nuanced. And so people will reach out and they'll say, oh, my parents, my friends, they don't want us to get married because, they say we're too young. And probably more than likely, and so they're like, hey, and they want me to be their advocate. Like, hey, JP, so, right, we can get married. We're 25, right? And it's like the issue is not that you're too young. It's that everyone who really knows you knows you're too immature. And they're using the word young to not hurt your feelings. And so people reach out, hey, we're in college, but my parents don't really want me to get married in college. It's like, for a lot of you, you shouldn't. For some of you, you should. It's like, I don't want to spend the next 2 years of dating in close proximity.
Yeah.
If I'm a mature follower, they're a mature follower. We're loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving our neighbor as ourselves. It's like, dude, get married. Marriage, like today, it's such a, we want the cake and the wedding and the, be able to, it's okay. Like there are things that are outside of our cultural ideal that are fine with God. Like God's like, oh, I don't care. I don't care if you're in college. If you love me, like, this is the thing. We did a podcast recently, right? Like, no rules in dating.
Yeah.
It's just like, love God. Love God. The whole thrust of your life is that you are madly in love with God, and everybody knows it, and everybody sees it, and then do whatever you want, Marry when you want. And if you say, wait, are you saying I'm going to love God and have sex? If you love God, you're not having sex. Like, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying is, like, if that's the trajectory of your life. But yeah, it's good. I want to clarify that because I think people are like, these are their questions. There's like, man, my super nuanced situation, and they want these broad brush, answers to those questions. But but the reality is, it's so nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the key that you. Oh, sorry, were you saying something?
No, I was going to ask a question, but you keep going.
Yeah, right before you go, I just think that's the key because sadly, there's a lot of people who think I can't get married until I have a certain amount of money in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
That's not always going to be the case.
Right.
And, I had a leader growing up who said, no one get married, until you have at least your bachelor's, because I guess that times were hard for them and they're looking like finances is not something simple. But I'm just like, everyone for one doesn't go to college.
Yeah.
That's not what God wants everyone to be at.
Right.
And I had another leader saying, listen, a bachelor's doesn't even mean anything. So if that's the case, you might as well go get your master's before you even get married. And it's just like, listen, if you guys are at that place where you're mature enough to take care of it, you guys are working on your bills, you're doing everything that you can do, marriage is the next step. Because I honestly believe more people fall into fornication because they're waiting on some perfect timing. No, there's no perfect timing. And I believe people who are financially stable, still, we're not always 100% ready emotionally, mentally, spiritually. We're all growing constantly,
Totally.
So
Yeah,
it's just important to make sure you're grounded, because if you're not grounded, you're wasting time. You're inviting someone into dysfunction.
Use the word fornication, which is the biblical word for sex outside of marriage. Go ahead.
That's good. You talk in your book about purpose-driven relationships, purpose-driven couples. Yeah. I remember when I was dating back in college, we only got 2 pieces of advice.
Was this like you were dating, or
was this
shut up
stuffed animal?
Okay, don't give that any attention. I was told 1 of 2 things, like don't have sex, and then the other piece of advice was have a Christ-centered relationship or a Christ. And I'm like, that was just very ambiguous and it wasn't even defined. Yeah. So what do you even mean by purpose-driven relationship? Can you explain like what that looks like?
Yeah. So I just kind of think of Adam and Eve when God first, brought her into the picture. She was viewed as a helper, So when I was mentioning earlier, knowing your identity outside of this person, it was because of that. Because if you don't know what your purpose is, chances are this relationship can honestly become a distraction, no matter how spiritual you are. You guys are just so infatuated with one another. You really don't spend any time with God. But when I view a purpose-driven relationship, I view it as though whatever my calling is, I'm more involved in it, or I'm more active or hype, or I'm ready to do it because of this woman in my corner. And I should be doing the same for her. So when I view a lot of people, they view it as though the man just always has to be the lead and he has to do, and I get it, the guy has to lead. But when I think of times in the Bible, God spoke to the women in a scenario. So it's not just the guy that needs to be spiritual. When we think of Samson's mom, the barren woman, God didn't speak to the husband, Manoah. We don't even know this woman's name. And God speaks to her saying, hey, you're going to have to go by this covenant. Your child's going to have to go by this covenant because I'm bringing in someone to help, defeat the Philistines. But we see that the husband, the woman is like, hey, I just saw an angel or something, and he's just like, well, I need to hear this, and then God speaks again to the woman, or the angel speaks again to the woman. So we see that it's 2 people that are connected that can hear the voice of God, 2 people that are connected that can walk in purpose. Whereas when you feel discouraged, I'm able to encourage you. I'm able to help push you towards whatever it is God calls you to do. And I don't mean it just in the sense of, because I preach, I teach, and my wife sings. That's not what I mean. We're not talking about who's going to be pastor and first lady of some church. No. Because I think we over spiritualize some things, but I honestly believe that you should be able to have someone in your corner that you're struggling with temptation. This person is able to not feed into that temptation, but help tell you like, hey, we're not going to do this. We're saving it for marriage. Or you're feeling frustrated. This person is able to encourage you. Hey, God is a present help in trouble. Whatever we're going through, God is going to be with us. You need someone in your corner that's able to help push you towards purpose. And if you don't feel like doing whatever it is God called you to do, because this person is always encouraging you, because this person is always supporting you, now you feel more spiritually revive in order to do this because you have them. So I believe a purpose-driven relationship is a relationship that you guys aren't just trying to build one another up, but you're trying to build a kingdom. You're trying to push God's agenda more than your relationship. Because sadly, a lot of relationships fail. But if a relationship fails, we should still be spiritually grounded in wherever our walks are. We shouldn't leave our relationship saying, man, all those Christian men are dogs and all those Christian women are this. It's just like, no. Like if it didn't work out, we still know our identity in Christ. So a purpose-driven relationship, you guys are just helping one another get closer towards God.
That's good.
Yeah, that's
like
good,
that.
man. That's good. Well, the book is Godly Dating 101. We're on with Tavares Gray. Any other thoughts around the landscape of dating? Any closing ideas that you just want to put in front of the audience that might be helpful to them just in this podcast resource that we would create and make available to them and say, hey, this is what I want you to do?
I'll say 2 things. Number one, if your standards are biblical, don't lower them. But if the reason why you're single is because of some crazy preference, please ask God to work on you. And I say this all the time because unfortunately, we think tall, dark, and handsome, short, curly, Latina. We think those things mean God's will. No. If the person has the fruit of the spirit, they're producing the fruit of the spirit, they're a loving person, they respect you, you guys are compatible, you're suitable, you're able to do the kingdom work together, that's someone you should be considering. And I think a lot of time, especially us as men, we have that. Oh, I don't know if a lot of women think this way, but I know us as men will think, well, something may be better out there. I've spoken to too many guys and they're single because, she's great, but I wonder if I could get something else. And it's just like, you're going to wake up one day, 30 or 40, and realize, and it's not to insult anyone who may be single at 30 or 40, but I want you to realize that you've been praying for a spouse and you've been rejecting everyone that God may have been sending your way. So it's important for you to understand that
FOMO,
preferences, preferences can be adjusted.
It's keeping people single. That's what I think is the biggest issue inside, or I would just say, like, people who are coming in the church, they want to get married. It's like, man, there's too many options, and they think there's not enough options. It's actually that there's too many. Hot take. That's a different podcast. What's the other thing?
No, I definitely agree. So please be sure that you're allowing God to work on, whatever your preferences are, because I believe a lot of that is rooted in lust, rooted in what society is telling us what beauty is, and not necessarily what the biblical version of beauty or a godly person should look like. So just ask God to work on those things. And another aspect is just understand that the Bible already told us no good thing will God withhold from those who are walking uprightly. So if you're walking in God's will, you're trying to stay close to him, understand that he's not trying to keep a spouse away from you. Don't feel as though because I'm single at this moment that God doesn't have a plan for me, God doesn't care about me, or everyone else on my timeline is dating, married, or pregnant. Don't feel as though, God has forgotten you because your timeline didn't work according to plan. But just be involved in whatever it is God has called you to. Because a lot of times we think our purpose or our worth begins at I do. When in reality, I feel like I could be delaying what God wants to do in my life because I'm just searching for the one so much that I'm missing what God is doing in this season. So if you focus on what God is doing now, you focus on what God is saying to you now, if you allow God to work on the issues you're dealing with now, or the trauma that you may have faced now, your spouse won't have to deal with a lot of insecurities and baggage and all those things you've been neglecting just because you've been seeking a spouse.
That's good. We're with Tavares Gray. The book is Godly Dating 101. Pick it up everywhere books are sold, especially Amazon. It's just easy. It shows up to your doorstep. And man, thanks for the discussion, Tavares. I appreciate it. I know we've gotten to hang out before and chop it up, but it's good to be back with you on a topic that I know we're both very passionate about.
Yep.
Appreciate you, man. And I pray next year I get to make it to Dallas. I'll see you guys in person. It's not a bucket list, but it's a plan for next year.
Yeah, come to Texas.
You make it to Dallas, and you're gonna have to drive an hour and a half south because we're in Waco, baby. Waco time.
No.
Yeah, man.
Never mind. You drive up. If I fly to Texas, you can drive up. So we'll work something out.
Yeah, we'll meet you. We'll meet you somewhere. All right, guys.
Blessings, guys.
Thanks for jumping on with us. We will see you guys next week.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Becoming Something, where we promise to keep the conversation honest and real for young adults in their 20s and 30s. Every moment we live is training for a future moment, and that's why we do this podcast, because we want you to be prepared for everything that life is going to throw at you. Our hope with this podcast is that it would help you become all that God desires you to be. To find out more, visit becomingsomething.com.